In 1837, America faced a serious economic calamity. Andrew Jackson had recently left office, the Second National Bank's charter had ended, and there was nearly $10 million of government funds spread across multiple private and state banks. The country was in economic shambles, and it was the beginning of the Panic of 1837. When President Van Buren took office, he tried to repair the damage that Jackson had done to the economy. He held a special session of Congress in September of 1837 and proposed a new economic plan to establish an independent treasury system. Senator John C. Calhoun attended this session and understood that it was a necessity to repair America's economic state and stop Jackson's pet banks from harming the economy more. In November of 1837, Calhoun wrote a letter to a few of his constituents in South Carolina to try and gain their support for his vote for the independent treasury system. In his public letter to the Southern constituents, John C. Calhoun assured them of his deep commitment to state rights and Southern unity. Calhoun reminded his constituents of recent Southern successes, the dangers of a national bank, the power of Southern unity, and the reasoning behind his past political actions. To gain support from his Southern constituents, Calhoun initially explained a few of the recent successes that would remind them of how great and powerful the South was when it worked together. He wrote in his letter, "I clearly saw that our bold and vigorous attacks had made a deep and successful impression. State interposition had overthrown the protective tariff, and with it, the American system, and put a stop to congressional usurpation, and the joint attacks of our party and that of our old opponents, the National Republicans, had effectively brought down the power of the executive and arrested its encroachments for the present." When Calhoun mentioned state interposition, he referenced the nullification crisis. John C. Calhoun played a large role in the nullification crisis because he anonymously wrote the South Carolina Exposition and Protest, which was a document explaining that South Carolina decided that they would not follow the laws of the Tariff of Abominations of 1828. In Calhoun's mind, the actions that South Carolina took during the nullification crisis were a large success. He felt that by creating such serious issues in the American government, he was able to make some of the policies of the government turn in favor for the South. Near the end of the nullification crisis, Andrew Jackson had the force bill passed, which allowed him to use military action against the South Carolinians for their disloyal actions. Although he did not end up using military actions against the South Carolinians, there was the threat, and the nullification crisis was ended. During his presidency, Jackson used a large amount of executive power, especially in vetoing multiple bills, more than any previous president. Jackson had shown his military aggression previously during the Seminole War and War of 1812, where he became a war hero. When the nullification crisis ended, Congress felt that they should try to limit Jackson's executive power more. South Carolina saw this as a victory because a Southern ideal was that there should be weaker central government, and this was Congress trying to limit that power. Also, during the nullification crisis, it was considered a success to Calhoun and his constituents because it had increased the Carolinians' allegiance to Calhoun. They felt that he was fighting for their rights and would support him later on in congressional debates. Gaining support from radicals in South Carolina meant more representatives than that were under his influence in Congress, which gave him more power in events such as the debate over Van Buren's Treasury plan. He used his letter to remind his constituents of their Southern victories and allegiance to him for the Treasury debate. President Van Buren proposed the independent treasury system to try and resolve the economic crisis that occurred after Jackson's presidency ended. The independent treasury system was designed to separate government funds from state banks to stop association with Jackson's pet bank crisis. Calhoun was in support of this treasury because it wasn't meant to give out loans or increase federal power. It was designed to store federal funds and keep it in one controlled area. He also supported it because he knew it would help bring balance to the economy where Jackson's pet banks had done harm to it. Calhoun understood that his Southern constituents would be wary of a national bank, as had been the standard of Southern mentality for decades. This was a standard of Southern mentality because federal banks represented stronger federal power and a Northern superiority because the South had very little need for banks with their income from slavery. John C. Calhoun wrote in his letter, "The connection between the government and the bank would by necessary consequence in the hands of that party have led to a renewal of that system of unequal and oppressive legislation which have impoverished the staple states and from which we have escaped with such peril and difficulty." Calhoun originally approved the charter for the Second National Bank in a Congress session of 1816. 20 years later, after his charter had run out, he had seen the adverse effects the bank had had on America and knew that his Southern constituents would have difficulty voting to start a new financial system in 1837 after events such as the Panic of 1819 happened, where the entire American economy crashed. Calhoun knew he had to make them understand that he wasn't in support of a new national bank as well. He explained how dangerous banks were to his constituents, and he knew that the Treasury wouldn't have the same powers as the bank. Analyst Ross M. Lentz explained that Calhoun knew Jackson's pet banks that still existed in 1837 were detrimental to America's financial system, and there had to be at least some sort of bank or treasury that protected the nation's funds. Calhoun used his understanding of the Southern distrust of banks to make his constituents feel secure that he was siding with them, a difficult task for a man who switched political parties multiple times during his career. Calhoun used his explanation on the dangers of a national bank and how having a Whig party be in control when the government was using the power of said bank to transition into a powerful message about Southern unity. Calhoun wanted to do more than just promote Southern unity for his cause. He wanted to unify into a party that reflected the federal party system of the constitutional era of America. Calhoun wrote, "Never was there before, and never probably will there be again, so fair an opportunity to carry out fully our principles and policy, and to reap the fruits of our long and arduous struggle. By keeping the banks and the government separated, we effectually prevent the centralization of currency and exchanges of the country at any one point, and, of course, the commerce and the capital, leaving each to enjoy the portion at which its natural advantages, which is industry and enterprise, may command. By refusing to join our late allies in their attack on those in power, where they have sheltered themselves, we prevent the complete ascendancy of the party and their principles, which must have followed and gain only opportunity we could have of rallying anew the old states' rights party of 1827. On the ground they then occupied as an opposing power to hold in check their old opponents, the National Republican Party. It would also give us a chance of effecting what is still more important to us, the union of the entire South. The Southern division of the administration party must reoccupy the old states' right ground. They have no alternative, and unless we, who have so long and under so many difficulties adhered to it, shall now desert our stand, the South must be united. If once united, we will rally around the old states' right party, all in every section, who are opposed to consolidation or the overaction of the central government. And the political parties will again be formed in the old and natural division of states' rights and national, which divided them at the commencement of government, and which experience has shown that the division of party most congenial to our system and most favorable to its successful operation." Calhoun had previously expressed the idea that the federal political system that was designed by the framers of the Constitution was a stronger political idea than the two-party system that existed in 1837. He expressed this when speaking in Congress against the Force Bill, and he expressed that the federal system was a superior system that would outlast what they had in 1837, and its ideals made the Force Bill unconstitutional. Calhoun was very exuberant about the Southern unity in his letter because he knew that if he could unify the South rather than specify a political party, they could control a majority in Congress. He was also using this to claim Southern unity through the constitutional separation of the national bank from the government to convince his constituents in South Carolina that he was not going to work against them in future political debates. John C. Calhoun constantly seemed to be an inconsistent politician who voted for and served under leaders with different political views. This was originally to accomplish his goal of becoming the president, but as that goal faded from sight, he kept switching political affiliations to achieve what he thought was best for the nation, specifically the South. Calhoun wrote in his letter to some influential constituents in November of 1837 to try and gain political support from them. His short-term goal was to gain their assistance in voting for Van Buren's treasury system that was less powerful and less dangerous than a national bank, and to try and repair the damages done by Jackson and his pet banks to the American economy. In the long term, Calhoun wanted to gain support from his South Carolinian constituents to develop total unity within the South. He used this letter to convince his constituents of his credibility and reliability by offering them explanations as to why he had no strict political affiliation. He had also used his actions that assisted the South, such as the success of the nullification crisis, to prove that he supported the South's power. Jackson was able to play to the understanding and mindset of his Southern constituents in his letter, which led him to voting for the passage of Van Buren's independent treasury system.